For it. Paul.
Yes, the first item is the 2011 fee schedule. This had been discussed previously. It will be adopting essentially the previous fee schedule with a handful of changes, including relating to the two ordinances that I'll be discussing in a few minutes. I think that a more recent version has been circulated among council, and I'll just need to get a final copy from Marcia to advertise. So I would ask for a motion to authorize advertising of the 2011 fee schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is the motion, whereas the proposed ordinance amending the subdivision and land development ordinance to add a provision regarding the removal of protected trees and woodlands. A draft of this was discussed at the work session. It was revised and circulated since then. Essentially, at this point in time, what we'll be looking to do is imposing a fee in lieu, or putting in place a fee in lieu for the removal of trees. The ordinance sets the fee, and that fee will also be included in the fee schedule for 2011. The fee is established for woodlands as well. The difference from the version discussed at the work session essentially is the quote-unquote penalty provision is limited only to subdivision and land development matters, where if the property owner removes trees or disturbs or removes woodlands inconsistent with an approved final plan, then the fees that have been established could be what is applied as a penalty in those cases. So I would ask for authorization of council to advertise the revised subdivision and land development ordinance by modifying the definition of woodlands and creating a fee in lieu for the removal of protected trees and woodlands.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And just for the record, because this is a modification to the subdivision and land development ordinance, it will require specific advertising as required by the municipality's planning code. This matter had already been reviewed by both the Borough Planning Commission and by the Bucks County Planning Commission, so it is not required to be sent back to those agencies again. However, if passed, it will need to be sent on to the Bucks County Planning Commission for filing with them. Okay. Next item is the parking permit ordinance. This was discussed as well at the work session. An ordinance amending the code of the Borough of Newtown, specifically amending the provisions concerning the issuance of parking permits. This ordinance is specifically changing a handful of provisions within the code. The first would be to expand the eligibility for an all-day parking permit so that it would not be limited only to one parking permit per entity or per business. The second would be to expand the physical appearance of a permit, that it would not need to be something hanging on the mirror, that the borough would be able to change the form of the permit. The number of permits will be established by the Borough Council and will be issued on an annual basis as opposed to a 6-month basis. Those essentially are the changes that would be taking place. I know there were a couple of comments. One provision that I had suggested, and I would need just some feedback from council now as to what would be advertised, would be, since the permits are being issued on an annual basis, you may want a provision in there that if a permit is applied for, say after June 30th, that the fee would be discounted, reflecting the shorter period of time. That is, of course, purely optional. Otherwise, I would ask for your approval. Well, I'd ask for some feedback first, see what the form of the ordinance is going to be, and then I'll ask for authorization to advertise. And there was also, I'm sorry, there was an additional comment about, I think Chief Tony had suggested limiting the availability of permits to each business. His concern was that one business could potentially buy buy out the stock of permits. So he thought that perhaps we would want to limit the number of permits available to any individual resident or business in the borough. Those are my comments.
Any thoughts?
Was there discussion at all around the amount of time, the parking? We talked, maybe going back to the chief to see if the vehicles overnight, what, the time of...
Well, the way that the ordinance is currently written, it basically the municipal parking lots, and this is as distinguished from special purpose parking lots. The municipal parking lots, which, for instance, would be right outside Borough Hall, they are open 24 hours a day, but parking is limited to I think a maximum of 3 hours between the designated hours. I'm not exactly sure. I can't recall what they are. I think it's maybe 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. or whatever it is. But as it stands right now, the municipal lots are available overnight. So it would require a more substantial change of that section of the ordinance to limit that if that were a concern.
I actually asked the chief this morning if he had any thoughts about that, because we had talked about that at the work session, and he's okay. Didn't have any concerns.
So, I mean, again, just so it's clear, the parking permit, all it does is it allows somebody to avoid that 3-hour limitation. Because right now you can only park in there for 3 hours. This would allow them to stay there all day. Otherwise, it doesn't add anything else, really.
The chief did suggest, I just stopped by and talked to him about a few things, because I had to give the mayor's report. He brought this up, that if there's going to be municipal parking available behind the liquor store, he suggests that might be a good place for all the permit parking to be. I don't think that's something that we necessarily discussed, but he as a suggestion.
Okay. How do you all feel about the idea of prorating the cost of a permit purchase after June 30th? Is that what you were recommending, Paul? After June 30th, to prorate the cost of the permit, because the permit would expire on December 31st.
Just for ease of, the way I drafted it, and for ease of accounting, so that Marcia and Pat are not sitting there counting the number of days, would simply be that the fee payable for a permit issued after June 30 in any year shall be 1/2 of the applicable fee set by resolution of the Borough Council. So we just cut it in half.
I tend to think not. It still requires the review of the application, the issuance of the permit. It's a relatively low fee to begin with, amounts to about 50 cents per work day over the course of the year. Having it for 6 months would amount to $1 a day. So,
I guess my only concern with that is, I mean, I can understand that, but are we going to be driving away people's willingness to even apply for a permit after June, and they'll wait till January? It would just save everyone the hassle of, all right, just get the 6-month permit and then get the full year, rather than just waiting it out, parking, taking up resident spaces and stuff. We're trying to drive them off the streets. That's the thing I'm thinking.
Fair point.
I don't know, maybe half may not be realistic, maybe what the old fee was or something like that.
I guess to Perry's point, the example set by New Jersey shore towns is, I don't think you get any discount regardless of when you get the beach tags for the season. That's right. You're right, Bob. Yeah, but during the season.
Well, it's 2 days or 2 weeks, same money.
Same money, right. You're right. There is a discount up front. We don't want to do that necessarily, but to Perry's point, there is a review of an application. There is a process which has to be followed, whether it's, there's 5 months left on it or 10 months. I guess ease of administration has a value to it, and frankly, we can use the money. Pay for that generator.
Well, Tony has to sell 50 parking permits, right? Okay, so is council of the mind just to leave it as the annual fee regardless of when you buy it?
I guess the question is, what do we do now?
It's an annual fee now.
It's an annual fee
Actually,
now?
yes, it is an annual fee.
On the books, it's a 6-month
6 months.
permit, but I think in practice it's been an annual fee, and I'm not aware of any discounts. Well, you wouldn't. I don't know if you would know, but I don't believe that there are any discounts. So.
I think there's, okay.
And just to clarify my statement before, these permits are issued by the police department, not by the office.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to leave it at the An annual fee?
Okay.
Okay. And then do we want to, in terms of limiting it, the number to each business, can that be part of the annual the resolution that council makes, or does this need to be part of the ordinance?
Well, that would need to be part of the ordinance. The ordinance does provide that council by resolution will determine the number of permits to be issued total and the fee to be charged for the permits. That can be set annually without changing the ordinance itself. If you're going to limit it right now, what it says is, and this is different than the existing ordinance, subject to the availability of all-day parking permits as authorized by resolution of the Borough Council, any resident of the borough and any business entity having its principal place of business in the borough may obtain one or more all-day parking permits upon submission of an approved application. So what I would basically suggest, I mean, I'll finesse the language, but what it would essentially say is any resident of the borough and any business entity having its principal place of business in the borough may obtain no more than X number of parking permits upon submission of an approved application. So I would suggest that that has to be in the ordinance. I mean, we could certainly put a provision in the ordinance that allows council by resolution to change it, but at that point I think it's a little bit hard to handle.
Just to clarify, Paul, if I work for a business in town, I still have to get my permit through the employer then?
Unless you're a resident of the town, in which
Correct.
case you can get it through that way. But yeah, if you live in anywhere else in the county and you work here, the employer would be the applicant. So presumably, again, depending on what the purpose is of the permits, the employer may want the ability to get as many as they can for all of their employees. And I guess Chief Tony's concern was that a large employer might, basically eat up the crop.
On the flip side of that, if we talk about opening up spaces on the street, on State Street, for instance, and on Court, Penn, and Center, then the larger business with a willingness to get a larger number of permits for its employees, it seems to me would serve that purpose. Although I'm sensitive what the chief is saying, that you don't want one employer to take up all of it, or a substantial majority of it. But that's a problem we're having with parking.
But if you take that a step further and say that, if we do indeed have the availability of the lot behind the State Store, I don't know how many spots are back there, but that would significantly add to our inventory of parking spaces, and we may want to actually encourage a larger employer to buy more permits to take it off the residential streets, where we may in fact put in a residential only permit.
And
For how long? How long are we going to have the availability of that lot?
Yeah, so is it a couple years?
Yeah, how long will we have the availability of the lot? And you're kind of building yourself into a catch-22, potentially. And isn't there a finite number of permits we're going to issue every year, like 140 or 150?
75 is what the
75?
chief has proposed.
So, I mean, when you take a look at a firm like Witchell's that have all kinds of people working there, I mean, they're going to want 10 or 20. I mean, they're going to want an allocation that's fairly significant. So it's a catch-22 if you try and do an allocation or limitation of 10. Is that finite number correct?
Right.
Should it be higher?
Just so I'm clear on what we're doing tonight, is there a suggestion of a cap being placed on the number tonight, or is that for discussion going forward?
well, you will be able, just by simple resolution, to establish the total number of permits being issued in any given time. And that can be changed from time to time. Obviously, you can't take away a permit once it's applied for. What we're talking about now is whether you want to include in the ordinance a cap on the number of permits that any specific individual, resident, or business owner can purchase. I mean, the issue with that, if I may just throw this out there, is enforcement as well, because if you put that limit, there's nothing stopping them from going to their neighbor business owner and saying, hey, can you go out and buy 10 permits for me, and and so on. So if it seems to be abused, council can always potentially adjust the number of permits available to respond.